This is the last personal conversation about my personal viewpoints that I will ever have, okay? Ugh.
Did I just get moved?
You got moved. I'm moving you around. What up, dude?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. What the fuck time is it over there? Some crazy shit right now, isn't it?
3 a.m. I mean that is crazy shit sometimes for me when I'm waking up later in the afternoon when I'm streaming, but luckily for me, at least at this point, I have a normal sleeping pattern,
Oh, okay.
something that is unusual for me.
Cool. All right, well, what's up, buddy?
I made a video that you really didn't like. I watched your response to it. You were really not happy. But as I said in the email to you, people informed me that you are really sick of talking about this. And perhaps that was why you seem to dislike me so much.
Well, I don't dislike you. I mean, I might dislike you. I don't know you well enough to dislike you. But basically, one
So
issue
you
that I
dislike the content. Yeah.
sure, one issue that I basically ran into a lot, and I've actually this is the first topic that I've ever come to this decision on. I'm probably going to obscure the my I guess the deeper parts of my moral system from now on because it's actually incredibly frustrating for me to talk about. Is that what I run into is when I have conversations of sometimes political conversations will reduce to philosophy. I would argue that this should always happen because we want to figure out, like, well, what ought we do in terms of any, policy decision. But the problem that I run into when things reduce down to philosophy is there are certain arguments that I've gotten into where when I lay out my rational justification for whatever it is I believe, the counter arguments are literally, you're lying about what you think. And there's no possible way for me to get to have a conversation with somebody that thinks I'm literally just lying about everything I say. So it ends up feeling like really, really, really fucking stupid to me.
I mean, the only time I think the underlying philosophy behind your views really matters is when you both don't agree on, or you don't have a mutual goal. If you both have a mutual goal, then it just becomes like a factual. What do the facts look like? How do we achieve this goal, right? It would only matter what your underlying philosophy is if you're trying to convince a person to adopt a goal that you have based on
Yeah,
your
sure. So
underlying
something
philosophy.
like, so there are extremists that I'll talk to, where say it'll be somebody like a white nationalist. If somebody is preaching for or race policies, race-based policies, this is probably going to come down to a discussion of philosophy at some point. It almost would necessarily have to because we're after very different like normative goals, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh, I like the point I would try to raise in my video, which
Mm-hmm.
perhaps I didn't do it well, is that you should almost never be able to convince another person just based on your words uh that you have an underlying philosophy that they've perhaps never run into before, or that is just so left field uh that it effectively seems impossible. And you saying multiple times like, oh, this is what I believe, this is how I assess myself, this is how I view patients. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, they shouldn't believe you because it doesn't matter how confident you
Yeah,
seem
I
to
guess,
be.
but like, what is the point of that?
I mean,
Let's
just
say
for
I
the
get into
purposes
an
of the
argument with
conversation.
somebody. Let's say I get into an argument about somebody about redistribution of wealth, okay, in the United States. Now, I would argue I'm okay with a decently higher rate of taxation on myself. I'm fine with that. You can bump it up, double digits. Like we can talk about a much greater, bump here. And if somebody were to say to me, well, I've never met anybody that would give up their own money. It's not like you're volunteering to donate your taxes to the IRS. You don't do it every year, so I'm not going to believe that position. Like, okay, well, how do we discuss things from this point when you literally think I'm lying about what it is I believe?
Well, at that point, you can kind of try to get them to think about other circumstances in their lives. Like, oh, have you ever met someone who has given up money to someone else? Or have you met people on the street who are advocating for these policies? Like, you should argue with them and say, this shouldn't be that unbelievable for you. People are posting Bernie Sanders in your chat right now. Look at Bernie Sanders. This should be something you should be able to accept about me because you have similar experiences in your life that make it plausible. It's just the point I was raising in regards to when you say I'm only self-interested, that should be very unusual for most people because in our lives we run into people who either aren't willing to make those statements or at least proclaim the opposite. Oh, I really care about people, and people seem to act all the time in a way where they care about other people just simply because they're other people, right? Once you get to that point where you can't argue from their experiences to make what you're saying seem more plausible, you're stuck, and there's nothing you can really do about that, I think, unless you can somehow in your chair demonstrate, look, I really don't give a shit about people. Stab a person in the face for completely no reason. Like, you can't do that, of course. And that's what I was trying to say in the video. Like, a lot of your viewers would be unjustified accepting many of the things you say about yourself or your self-assessments, because there are more evidenced explanations for your self-assessments, namely self-delusion or lying. I was saying, like, I don't know how you would disagree with this.
So I need to go out and like find a way to secretly murder someone, and then that, like,
If you were really convinced, if you really wanted to convince a person of another viewpoint, but at the end of the day, it might just be impossible for you to convince that person, right? You shouldn't do this unless you really, really care about convincing this other person that you're telling the truth, or what have you, which you shouldn't really care all that much, right? There are some conversations
well, I
where
generally
speaking
I
over the
agree with
phone-
you that I don't really care. The big primary issue this ran into, though, was the veganism debate, which exposed that my underlying motivations, I think, for a lot of my arguments are far different than a lot of other people's, or rather, I guess I've deluded myself into thinking that some of my underlying arguments are different than other people's.
Well, of course, it's not necessarily the case that you are deluded, but we each have the capacity for self-delusion. I would argue maybe that we're all somewhat self-deluded, right? It'd be very
Yeah, but we're using weasel words now, because the gist of the video was that I'm probably more deluded than most if I'm claiming something that's far outside the norm, right? That was the general thesis of the video, or at least like
My
a big
point
sub
was-
point, right?
well, my point was, at least for your viewers, if they don't have experience that suggests that what you're saying about yourself is capable for other humans, or that is capable for people to have positions that you hold, explanations such as self-delusion and lying are more justified than believing what you're saying to be true simply on the base, simply given the justification that you've currently given, which is, I'm saying it's true, which is all you've presented thus far. But that's, as I say to you, that's all you can present, because it's not like you can start stabbing people in the face in your room to demonstrate that you don't really care about people, right?
Sure.
The point of the video was pretty mundane. It was effectively arguing that for non-mundane claims, there's a certain burden of proof that you perhaps in your room are unable to meet for a lot of your viewership, and they would, in that case, be more justified evidenced explanations than the non-evidence explanations, which would be what you're saying being true.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it just makes it sound like then that I can never discuss like certain moral positions that I have because I haven't actually murdered someone to prove that I don't care about another person, even though murdering someone
Well,
would put
that's-
myself in a significant amount of like physical discomfort, because I'm probably gonna get fucking charged for fucking murder, or that I need to go
for
hunting
some-
or something and like
No.
you know, like shoot a deer like in the leg and then go skin it alive or some shit, and then I can be like, okay, look, now will you guys take me seriously? Like, I don't know, these just, I guess it's
There
just
was
annoying that I
some,
feel like
right?
a lot of people
But-
like won't like engage with with
the,
my
the point I made
position,
at the end of the video was that for politeness, or for simply just the enjoyment of your content, you may as well just accept what Destiny says about himself is true. Well, talking about you in the third person, or whatever, but because whether or not you're speaking true about yourself doesn't really matter for your viewers, right? If you're telling the truth or that you're deluded, it doesn't really change how correct your arguments are. It
Well,
won't impact the lives of your viewers.
I mean,
Who really
I would
cares,
agree
right?
with you in a vacuum, but socially, that's absolutely not true. The way that most people engage with my positions, especially as of recently, is to just say that I'm lying about everything I think. That's the main reason why. I guess so if I back up, and I try to ascertain the main message of your video, if I think about it, I would probably agree that if somebody claims to be holding an incredibly abnormal position, that you're more likely to believe that that position is untrue rather than to believe the person given no evidence of an extremely abnormal claim. Is that more or less the position?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as points that I made in the video were just to establish that we have good reason to believe that everyone has the capacity for self-delusion.
Sure, which is true. But I guess the problem I'm running into is that as of recently, like that thought that I'm just lying to everybody is used to hand wave all of the arguments that I've made that concerning anything related to like ethics or whatever, which is kind of irritating because I can't counter that if you just say that I'm lying about
Might
everything.
just be facts.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could solve that problem. Like for me, for example, explained most things using self-interest, like most people's actions and motivations and stuff using self-interest for quite a long time. Nothing you say about yourself appears difficult for me to accept. The one thing that I mentioned in you've made statements like
Wait,
like
hold on, your mic got cut
the
off.
base.
I've made statements like what?
Oh yeah, I think it's something like your mental foundation that all of your motivations come from is your desire to continue to exist. This I had trouble with you saying. Misremembering or
No, I think that's probably true. Like but I genuinely, like, when I try to build these arguments for myself, like, this is generally what I see as my being as real a position as I guess it can ever be. I don't know.
you know,
Wait, hold on, wait,
pessimistic.
I don't. Your mic just, I think, got cut off a lot. I don't know if you were talking just then.
I'm just mumbling, I guess. Okay.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. If you're mumbling, that's fine. But if you're trying to say stuff, it's not picking up. Yeah.
Oh shit! I know why I'm. So I'm using
Voice activation.
The browser Discord instead of the
Oh yeah, I got you.
the actual Discord. Can I just change for a second?
Sure, go for it. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hey, what's up?
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I don't do many voice conversations on Discord, and I had pushed to talk on because I was talking to someone from Razer a few days ago. I don't know why. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So all I was saying is, so how bad was the audio previously?
It was
you
actually really good.
get
It
everything?
was just like cutting off a little, but
Yeah, I don't know why the browser Discord does that to me, but anyway. So what I was saying is you've made statements about like the fundamental motivation that you have, and I find those hard to believe because, well, for similar reasons that we're talking about before, I've never run into a person who couldn't be given a hypothetical about some form of existence that they wouldn't rather death over that existence, right? So would you be willing to exist experiencing nothing but pain and suffering for an eternity?
yeah,
Would you rather
I
that-
mean, I've made that concession multiple times. That, like, in general, I would say that, like, I would endure a large amount of suffering to continue to exist, because I find existing almost universally preferable to not existing. But like, if you were to cut off like my ears and cut out my eyes and cut off all my limbs, and I was just like rolling around on the ground as like a deaf and blind blob, then I mean, yeah, at that point I would probably rather just die. Sure.
Like I agree with that because I don't see existence as the main thing. Like it's not the end, it's the means to the end. Like there's a lot of things that I value about existence, and for that reason I want to continue to exist. But if you removed those things from existence, I wouldn't see existence as valuable anymore because it would lose, the ability to achieve those things.
Gotcha. Maybe because the default state that I experience is generally happiness. Maybe that's what ties my value into existence.
Sure. Like I hear that sometimes. Would you be willing to like I assume you don't like pain, suffering, terror, things like that. But you enjoy happiness, satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, those are almost
imagine.
tautological, right? Pain by definition is something not enjoyed. Suffering. Yeah. Sure.
Oh, I mean, some people do enjoy pain.
Well, but then it's not pain in the sense we're talking, right?
Oh, well, I guess so. I mean, you'd be getting pleasure. From
Yeah,
an
you'd be, yeah,
experience that
like
most
somebody in
people enjoy.
BDSM
Yeah,
wouldn't say they enjoy suffering. When they say suffering, they don't mean like suffering like it's bad. Suffering like a pain that feels good is different, right? But yeah, go ahead.
So would you? So I offer you 20,000 years of life, let's say, but for the first 10,000 years, you will experience the highest levels of terror, pain, and suffering imaginable. But after that 10,000 years, you would experience 10,000 more years of happiness, joy, satisfaction, the things that you value. Would you take this deal?
Without getting
would you
really
rather die?
stupid about it, I would say yes
Well,
instantly.
Yeah. See,
So
that's,
the
I mean,
only
it's
now
not unbelievable to me.
sure
It's not
the only
unbelievable to
the
me,
only
but it's
caveats I
surprising.
would say just in case is that, like, obviously if the Earth blows up in 1,000 years and I'm floating through space for the last 10,000 years with nobody to interact with, I mean, I would obviously say no. But yeah, in general, yeah, I would definitely say yes to that. 10,000 years of life, yeah, at the expense of 10,000 years of suffering, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but in that order, of course, that's the
Yeah,
important
for
thing.
sure, sure.
A lot of people, that's what this isn't surprising to me. This is something that I can totally accept about you, but
Uh-huh.
it is a position that I myself would not hold. At least that's how I envision myself. Like I don't really know, of course, as getting back there, self-assessments, extrapolation, blah blah blah.
For sure.
my most likely judgment is that I wouldn't accept such a deal.
Yeah, I agree
And
with that, and I even agree that most people probably wouldn't. Although I feel like most people view, and I could be self-deluded, but I feel like most people do have a radically different view of existence than I do in terms of whether or not you value it or whatnot. Like, there's a ton of memes where people joke about like, oh, like I wish I was dead, or like this is suffering my life, or whatever. Where I absolutely, unequivocally, totally reject and disagree with these statements. I absolutely enjoy every single day of my existence, and I look forward to every single day of my existence, and I exist in a state of perpetual contentedness with life, such that I would want to continue it, infinitely. Like when people wrestle with the question, like, would you want to be immortal or not? Well, I'd have to watch all my family die, but I wouldn't think for a second. I would instantly say yes to that without a second thought, for sure.
Are you saying immortal as in like you have eternal life, or immortal as in you can't die?
Some balance of those two, where I'm not like floating into eternity, like in a void where nothing is happening, but like so that I could live to the final days of humanity. I would say absolutely yes, like, and not being like old and decrepit and dying in a bed the whole time or something.
The ideal eternal life to me is perfect health, living forever, but you can kill yourself. That's the only way that you can die.
Yeah,
which
sure.
seems like the best move. You have perfect control of your fate, which I think most people want.
Okay, sure.
Control. And so most of what you said here, assuages my, qualms with what you were saying. Okay, so in my mind, then the exact root of all your motivation can't be existence if you're willing to give up existence. Or like, you likely have, because who really knows? You likely have many different things that motivate you equally in some balance at the core of your being, and existence is probably a major part of that, right? Because I mean, if you're willing to give up existence under some conditions, it cannot be the pure thing that you're trying to maintain, or the thing that that all of your motivations come from.
Sure. So what you're essentially saying is that my claim is that I value existence in and of itself, but what you're arguing is, well, that's not true. You value existence, but that's contingent upon some type of existence, right? Some quality of existence, and the quality is what I'm using existence as a proxy for, right?
Yeah.
I think I agree with that. I would have to think about that a lot, but that's probably true, because if my existence was constant misery, then I might not agree with that. That existence in and of itself is a good quality or whatever. Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
And the way that I would argue that in the past is I would say that it is good, but that's because mentally I'm thinking that at some point I would escape the misery. But that's not necessarily true, right? I understand what you're saying, sure.
Yeah, because many people, when they're in bad situations, they say, well, this is a bad situation now, but in the future I'm gonna feel happy, or it might get better. But if that wasn't the case, it would be, I think, rational for people to kill themselves. Like people who are like assisted suicide or whatever. People can rationally just be in non-stop pain and just go, well, I won't experience a year of pain, I'm just ready to die.
Sure. And if somebody were to make the argument, well, I would find a way to make the best of it, then you're still circumventing the idea. You're saying, well, okay, so you're going to try to find some way to increase the amount of pleasure to outdo the amount of pain. So it still comes down to whether or not your existence is preferable or not, to whether or not you want to continue it, not continue it for the merit of just existing, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. I think I agree with that. Sure. So then really I would need to contextualize every time I say I value infinite existence, or every time I value my existence, that valuing of my existence is contingent upon the levels of contentedness that I feel in my everyday life. And if that was under permanent threat, then I would necessarily reevaluate how I feel about existence, right?
It's contingent on a certain quality of existence.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Yeah. I think I have to agree with that.
Then I have no real problems with any assessments that you make about yourself in regards to self-assessment and what likely motivates you to do what you do. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's true, of course. I just have no issue with accepting it, because I can never know. I don't know you as a person.
Sure.
It's just not unbelievable for me, because I think the same thing about myself in many respects. But we've likely been socialized differently, because when I see someone suffer, I feel empathy. I want them to not suffer, but I think it's partly because I don't want to feel bad about their suffering. I'm motivated. When I help a person, I feel good when I help a person. And when I feel like I'm benefiting them, I feel good because of that. But if you remove those feelings of goodness, those good feelings that I have, I don't think I would continue to perform those actions. And
So
I don't know
what
that for
you,
certain, of course.
yeah, what you just
But that's
said
kind of
right
led me to
there.
believe that I'm self-interested.
Yeah, what you said right there is a lot of people are critical of me and my positions on egoism because they say, well, if it reduces to altruism, why even call yourself an egoist? Like, it's really dumb. But I feel like there is a predictive power to that egoist position that you lose if you project it to altruism. Such as, let's say that I can run two programs. Let's say that I can run a program where you donate $10 a day and it feeds a kid in Africa every day. Let's say that I can run that program one of two ways. I can either make it so you donate the money, you don't know where it goes or anything, blah, 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 blah. You just send the money and you know the kid is saved. Or you donate the money and then every month you get like a card or a YouTube video or something of this child and their family and how they're doing. That if somebody were to argue with me, Destiny, egoism is stupid. Of course, everybody does what they want to do. That's vacuous. Let's just call them altruistic. Well, my argument would be, well, hold on. This person acts in an altruistic way, but they're really driven by their own motivations. And what happens is if we don't include like these personalized things to appease somebody's, that they're actually not going to act in a way that you would say altruistically anymore, right? That the fact that people are self-interested can actually give like powerful prescriptions on how policy or certain positions should be dealt out. That's why I like looking at things from an egoist perspective, if that makes sense. A self-interested way where they want to see, the fruit of their labor or something, that you have to find a way to appease somebody's personal drive, and that's what motivates them to do good acts. Sorry, go on.
What I would expect you to say about those people who would do it, irrespective of those incentives, is that they still do have incentives, as in like they would.
It's just more internalized and less externalized. Yeah.
I think this is what a good person would do. I like thinking I'm a good person, so I'm going to continue to do this. Or they get that dopamine or whatever chemical it is in their brain when they do their good deed. It makes them feel good, so they keep doing it. It's more addiction to the drug than helping people. But
yeah,
I'm in your camp where we ultimately just want to find out under what conditions people will do things that we want them to do, and then seek to alter the environment so that
maximize those.
Are most likely influenced to do the actions that we want based on whatever goals we might have for society.
Mm-hmm.
Irrespective of the ultimate reasons why we want those goals, right? If two people have the exact same goal, I don't care as much how they reach that goal in most cases.
Yeah, I disagree on that. I mean, like,
it depends on the case, right?
The reason why I care about the thought process is because for future cases, you might be predicting worse outcomes, if that makes sense.
Sure. It'd be very weird if a person had completely different motivations to you, and on every single issue was perfectly lockstep with you. You'd eventually, it'd be more favorable if they just completely agreed with you on the underlying reason for the goal.
Yeah, it's possible, but you can get into weird situations with like a religious person. So like I would probably share a lot in common with a decent Christian, not like an evangelical conservative, but like somebody that wants to make society better for everybody, cares about everybody, wants people to do better. Like I would arrive at a lot of similar conclusions as them, but then we might end up in very weird areas if we start talking about like oh, should gay people be allowed to get married? And all of a sudden they're giving me like hard line no's. And maybe these are kind of niche examples, but
there's a statement that I think Bill Maher once said, not that I'm saying I love Bill Maher or anything, but I remember he's saying something like, if a person agrees with you 95%, or in this case, agrees with 95% of your goals, maybe worrying about them isn't the best use of your time, considering there's a lot of people who
that are at 5% or something. Yeah,
exactly. And if that Christian, for whatever reason, on that one issue, wasn't in your camp, and your goal was to have people, like as many people as possible, agree with you on as many issues as possible, they probably wouldn't be the first person that you'd attack, unless of course you saw other underlying similarities between you and them, other than the Christianity, that you could somehow appeal to.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I probably would agree with that.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know what we disagree on anymore.
Okay. Yeah, probably not much. Do you have any? What?
Because so I have a mod who likes watching your stream. I watch it quite a bit myself. Usually things you put on YouTube. But he's always said, Matt, you should find something to debate Destiny about. And one of the reasons why I wasn't really keen to have this conversation is I didn't think we disagree on much.
Yeah, and that's usually when I talk to most things. Yeah, when I talk to most people that are reasonable, they're pretty boring conversations. There might be like one or two points that we understand each other's points of view on, and we just kind of agree to disagree. But for the most part, there's not much to
Yeah, like the issues where perhaps I don't agree with you is usually because I myself don't have a particularly solid opinion, or like I recognize merits on both sides and I could fall either way at any time. You
Sure.
have made statements that I found hard to accept. If you want to end the conversation, it's perhaps the best place to end it, but I could raise
Um,
some other.
no, hold on. Actually, wait. Let me ask a quick question, and then I'll let me ask my chat a quick question. Wait, guys, I've got 4 level ups. What the fuck am I leveling towards next? What big thing should I get? Somebody tell me in chat. Okay, go for it. What are some statements that you disagree with quite a bit?
I remember you saying something like, "This isn't the only reason you're pro-life," but you made a statement like, "I'm pro-life because I myself wouldn't want to be aborted." Like you brought it down to self-interest, but that didn't really seem to make much sense to me because you're already alive, and being a determinist, you would recognize that there was no way that you could, as long as the initial conditions of the universe were exactly as they were, there's no way that you could not have existed, irrespective of like what the laws are in the future. They can't possibly have any benefit to you.
And I think other people are self-interested. Now, if I live in a self-interested way and I think other people are self-interested, I need a way to motivate them to take my interests into account. And I can't compel them to do it morally because I don't believe in that. So what I have to do is either create a society that does it or find some way to incentivize a person for doing it. And the easiest way to do that is some sort of quasi like social contract position, right? Like I won't murder you as possible. Say I take the argument, well, a fetus isn't a person yet, kind of, or they haven't become it. They can't advocate for themselves. It's whatever. We can abort a fetus.
Well, they can't engage in social contracts.
Yeah, they can't. Well, but they will be able to, which I think is important, right? That human is a kind of thing that can at some point reciprocate these types of values and punish me for not reciprocating them. The worry would be that I've said that abortion is okay.
Slippery slope that I don't think you've justified fully. Like just like if we had a definition of humanity that started at 6 months into development of a fetus or whatever, you'd be fine.
Oh,
Like,
I
it would go
100
all the way
trillion
through.
percent fully agree with you. Yes. The biggest crux to my abortion argument is that I believe that you're a human that is worthy of any consideration to give another human at the moment of conception, because that was the most rigorous, consistent answer to me. If there was a better definition of that, then I would be on board with it. But that's just like the best definition that I could find.
Well, so, can I ask you what distinction you draw between, like, so in the future, I could engage in actions that would lead to the birth of humans. They would have names, they would live lives, they would, they would be my children. I choose not to do this. I choose because I'm not infertile, and in a statistic, I'd eventually have kids. What way is this different from aborting a fetus, like a fertilized egg, moments after conception?
I mean, like,
because if we go back far enough, if
no,
your
I agree.
parents
It's
had
just,
made different actions,
yeah,
you
no, I
wouldn't
agree.
exist,
I
right?
just, I'm worried that this is going to get down to some very weird, like, epistemic shit, because that's where all my arguments about this kind of stuff seem to go lately. But like, I guess,
I just think it's arbitrary on some sense. And you have to draw a line somewhere.
well,
Like,
yeah.
if-
So
if-
like
if
the
you tried
line is
to-
that like, because people will say like, well, what if your parents could have made a different decision, or what about a sperm, or what about an ovum, or whatever? Well, what I would say is that like, I am never a sperm, and I am never an ovum, and I'm never a decision that my parents may or may not make. However, I can trace the beginning of my existence physically back to that single zygote when the ovum and the sperm, collide. That is the definitive start of my physical existence. I can't go to a point earlier than that. I don't believe I was ever a sperm. I was never an ovum, and I was never a decision or a concept. That this is the physical start of my existence. So that seems to be the best part to define when I begin to exist. That's how I feel.
well-
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it kind of still wasn't. You were in some sense the whatever little bits of atoms or whatever that existed prior to your conception. You were those things. They did eventually all form together. You know that the whole expression, "We were once upon a time stardust" or whatever. It's technically true, right?
Yeah, I guess I
Uh,
just like in
it-
terms of like
it's-
looking at
you-
the defining me as an object or me as an entity.
Sure.
I mean, like, yeah.
You could use like an analogy of a tree becoming a table, where a tree isn't a table, but at some point in time, through manipulation of that tree and its wood, eventually becomes recognizable as a table. If you tried to sell a tree as a table, people would go, "What is this? This is garbage." But it's still, that wood eventually become that table, right? And it's kind of, people disagree as to at what point the tree would be the table, I guess, is the point. Kind of. I mean, this is a bad analogy.
Well, I mean, the analogy works. It just kind of sucks because we don't yield or we don't give moral consideration to tables, so we don't really think about it much.
Okay.
I acknowledge that my position here is a little bit iffy, but but I feel more comfortable defending this position than defending stages of life or traits. Those I feel, so like you can attack my position with this kind of idea that like, well, maybe you could argue that you were a concept at one point, but I feel better standing in defiance of that and going, well, no, I would say that I'm a zygote, rather than taking the other position where it's like, okay, well, some arbitrary form of brain function or something defines you as a human, because it's like, I'm uncomfortable acknowledging that like 2 seconds prior to that brain function, you could kill me, but then right then, now I earn moral consideration or whatever. That I'm uncomfortable with that type of argument. Whereas I'm okay saying it in terms of like sperm, ovum, and fetus, right? Before I become a zygote, when that little sperm is just swimming around, I don't care if you spermicide the fuck out of it or whatever. That was never me. An egg was never me. But the fetus, that is me, or the zygote is me, I guess, is would be my thing.
We get into this weird problem though, where we're kind of defining humanity in a way that like 50% of it was like it's like, you know, there's many different stages of in the development of a baby or whatever, where
Yeah, sure.
there can be a miscarriage or you know, the fertilized egg doesn't attach to the wall of the uterus,
Yeah, it doesn't
or
implant,
it's
yeah.
attacked by whatever, and so, but it's like 40-50% of fertilized eggs don't get born, right? So
Sure, I've heard the number
with
10 to
this
20%,
definition-
but it's very obvious that
Oh.
I'm going to say here that like it's not like you're a murderer if that baby gets miscarried or whatever. Like I don't think that impacts my
no,
argument at all.
But it would imply, if we have any idea that humanity should be protected for whatever reason, that this is kind of the first place we should start, and that is some sort of genetic modification for women to prevent these miscarriages from happening, because 20-30% of humans are dying prior to birth. That would be like the biggest consideration that as a person who doesn't
so
want...
under my system, I would necessarily have to consider that a genocide of sorts, and I would need to account for that in
Yes.
some policy position. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never considered that before. I would really have to think about that before giving a response to that. Because what you're saying is any policy or whatever that I enact is totally stupid, because fucking 30% of humanity is being killed every time people get pregnant, and this is something that has to be accounted for before I do anything else, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you get into issues of how would you combat this, and you'd be necessarily hitting up, bashing against other values you have in regards to freedom, you know, autonomy of the body and stuff like that.
Sure. Things like Plan B would become illegal or would be considered murder and whatnot, yeah.
Sure. This is the issue why I don't debate abortion. I don't think there's a correct answer, and it kind of just becomes down to some kind of
Very
arbitrary
yeah.
pragmatism kind of...
Yeah, this is what, and I fully
don't know.
acknowledge that. And if I don't know if you've heard me get my full position, but like I would never be in favor, from a policy point of view, of making abortion illegal. My goal is always to seek to reduce the number of abortions by making contraception available and by making sex education available so people can make better contraceptive decisions. In a society, I would never make it illegal. And this is an argument that I fully acknowledge. I could be swayed one way or the other on. I'm just generally the discomfort for me comes from the idea that at one point I was a non-person, and then something arbitrary happened and I instantly became a person. And that might even be like a continuum fallacy on my part or something. I don't know, but yeah, I could be swayed either way on that, I think.
You get into the issue where if your parents used contraception, you wouldn't be here, yet you advocate for contraception.
Sure, but again,
kind
like
of is
I
a
don't
problem.
think I can give. Fuck, there was a paper that I actually even read part of. As embarrassing as it is, having to do with giving moral consideration to things that don't exist yet, and it was something that is almost impossible to do. For reasons that I don't remember. Fuck, I would need to go back and read it. But yeah. I mean, I understand I understand your point. Yeah.
Whether or not something exists is to some extent, well, because we're talking about the at what stage does a fertilized egg become a human? Like that's at the point we would say it exists. That its physical material exists, it isn't necessarily important, as you kind of say about the... Like prior to the contraception, the physical material does exist, even if it's not in the form that we would recognize it as a fertilized egg. At some point, we're just arbitrarily going, this is when it exists, and this is when we care.
Sure, and I guess my arbitrary point is genetics, is what I would say, right? That you are, for all intents, for the most defining thing about, well, I don't know if I can say that, biologically or physically, the most defining thing about you is your genome, right? And that's what's formed at the moment of conception. Like that's your unique code that codifies for all your traits, biologically at least.
Sure, yeah, and as I say, I'm not really... I support... Because I think the default position you can have is to do nothing. Because like if there's no regulation, making regulation is doing something. If you're undecided, you kind of have to do nothing. I don't know. I think I'm more on the side of pro-choice, for pragmatic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
not
and
sure
I
to
think
what
I
extent
am
I
as
really
well.
care
Yeah.
about fertilized eggs or whatever, but
Sure.
it's a tough issue, and this is why I don't discuss it.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
And that's about all I can think of that you've said that I disagree with.
Gotcha. Okay.
um, yeah. So
All right.
thanks
Well,
for the
hey.
conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for the conversation, buddy.
Yeah. Can I shout out my stream?
Yeah. Knock yourself out, dude.
Yeah, I don't know how many. I mean, do you remember when you hosted me once before?
What were you doing?
It wasn't what I was doing. My friend. So
Oh,
you
your
were gonna
friend.
host a-
Yeah, you had a gay friend. He's like, oh, host my gay friend or some shit, and I didn't have anyone else in chat, so I was like, ah, fuck it, I'll do it.
Yeah, it was very funny. I love that story. He meant to say something like, "I'm gay for your content."
Okay.
Anyway, you say I'm Dark Viper AU on Twitch. I speedrun GTA 5, as weird as that is to a lot of people, but it's hard to get noticed on Twitch these days, and it is a kind of niche thing. Because like 99.5% of the viewership watches the top 5,000 streams, and at any given time there's 60,000 streams. It's hard to get anywhere on
Yeah,
Twitch these days.
The
but
rich get richer.
yes, that is the analogy. So thanks again for the conversation.
Yeah, no problem, dude.
Have a good one, man.
Yeah. Wait, what's your channel? Link it in my DGG chat, at least.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Did I not say? Dark Viper AU.
Oh, you might have said it, but if you have a link to click, people.
Sure. Some of your viewers are now some of my most. Some that host are still around, which is quite nice. Anyway, have a good one, everyone, and thank you, Destiny.
Yeah, have a good one, buddy.